Well, I must say, he's definitely an exception to the rule. First and foremost, on behalf of my sister Kim, myself, his brother, the rest of the family, we thank you for taking the time out of your day to come. We hate that it's under these circumstances, but hopefully the next time the circumstances are better. Since going to boot camp, I was told that Marines don't cry. We just get allergies really bad. So if I start to have a moment, don't worry, I'm just having an allergic reaction. It's okay. Well, what do you say? I mean, what really do you say? I asked myself multiple times, how do you have the perfect funeral? And I went for days and days and couldn't find an answer. Then I realized you cannot have a perfect funeral. It's said that you must celebrate one's death and not mourn their loss. But I admit initially it was kind of difficult because while he was ill, his illness brought out the worst in some people. They thought more about them and less about him.
Amen.
But then as he passed, that tide took a turn. And then they thought more about him and less about them. Which, on that note, I'm going to try to celebrate his life, but at the same time, mourn his death. Why? Because he's my father, the exception to the rule. I've been to combat, but I'm no hero. I did my job just like everybody else. My father, he was a hero. He was definitely a hero. Not to mention, growing up on, living on the south side and west side of Detroit, that just increased his hero status. Because the southwest side is a lot like combat. Because in combat, you hear shots every day. On the southwest side of Detroit, you hear shots every day too. In combat, when you're moving, if not on foot, you're in an armored vehicle with weapons. If you're driving down Liddesdale, you need an armored vehicle and weapons. Like I said, he definitely was a hero. It's easy to be drawn to him. After one conversation, you get sucked in. You want to know more. You want to hear more. And you wonder what he's going to say next. As a child, he was my hero. I looked up to him and wondered what he was going to teach me next. I watched his every move and made mental notes that would help develop me into the man that I am today. But as time went on, his children got older. Then they had children of their own. And unfortunately, we all left the state of Michigan, which in a sense left somewhat of a void. But he made it known that he was most proud of the successes of his children and the successes of his grandchildren. It was no secret. With that void, to fill that void, he took the younger generation of the southwest side of Detroit and called it his own. He took those individuals and treated them like they were his. He took care of them, pampered them, and gave them the shirt off his back. He has a kind heart that I could not match. If I can only have half the heart that he had, I might measure up a little bit closer. But God made that impossible. Why? Because he's my father, the exception to the rule. Over the past couple of weeks, I will admit, I probably learned more about him in the last 2 weeks than I have in my 42 years of life. I was like that kid again, and I'm listening to people talking, absorbing all that information, and it was like, wow, damn, my hero lives, because it was new information. One thing I did learn that some of you learned today that I'm going to share with you. I actually learned who Boogaloo was. Prior to coming back to Detroit, I would get phone calls and people would talk about Boogaloo, and I'm like, I have no idea. And then I made it to Detroit, and people would talk about Boogaloo, and they would have, dialogue, and I'm like, is this some Detroit rapper? I have no idea. And I'm like, well, he must be pretty popular in the city. Then I had a conversation with my sister. She used the term Boogaloo. And I'm like, either I'm outdated, or maybe it's just some actor, some superhero, who had some action figure. I have no idea. So I turned to her, and I said, hey, sis, who is Boogaloo? And she said, that's Dad. And I thought to myself, what 65-year-old man go around being called Boogaloo? But of course, I wouldn't say that to his face. Why? Because he's my father, the exception to the rule. You all know, if you haven't learned today, yes, he was in the Army. I'm a Marine. And through the other branches of service, there's always that friendly rivalry that we like to have. The Marines will talk about the Army will talk about the Navy, and everybody will just talk about the Air Force. That's how it went. But, so every person that I came across, I would have that conversation. And except one individual, and that's that man to my left. There was no need for that conversation. Why? Because he's my father. It's the exception to the rule. So he's a man, definitely a great character, and loved and will be missed by all. But prior to him passing, he didn't understand. He didn't have a clear understanding of what he meant to people. So after he passed, he had a conversation with God.
Amen.
Right.
And God told him, Monroe, I'm going to leave you on earth before bringing you to heaven just a little while longer. Because I want you to see what you actually mean to people. And him being him, he asked why. And God said, because I'm your father. And I made you the exception to the rule. Thank you.
Amen.